How do we help kids grieve after suicide? That's the topic that we're going to address today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager, and today I have an award-winning expert guest. Her name is Dr. Natalie Ford, and she is a licensed professional counselor, an adjunct professor, a speaker, and a writer, and she refers to herself as a hope dealer. Welcome, Natalie. I am so delighted to have you share on this very important, more critical than ever topic today.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Ford, let's launch into some specifics about how to respond to our kids when they don't understand what just happened. And let's look at the different age levels and what we would say to them at the Sentinel event when it happens.
Or with a preschooler, we might just simply tell them that the person has died. And if they ask questions, we might say, the police found them and they were dead, and talk to them about what it means to be dead. Because for a preschooler, they may not have any frame of reference for that. If in the past they've lost a pet, that could be a good frame of reference to help them kind of think back on that loss and kind of process. With elementary school children, a lot of times I'll talk to them about how sometimes somebody has an illness that maybe causes them to die, and that there are also mental illnesses in our brain that sometimes cause us to do things that we would never do if we were healthy. And I will introduce the word suicide and ask the child, have you heard this word before? What do you know about this word? And if they don't, then I'll tell them a lot of times when people, when their brains aren't working properly, then they don't see any other answers to their pain, and their brain convinces them that by hurting themselves, they'll find relief. And we know that's not the only option, but that's all they can hear because that's what their brain is telling them. And keep it very simple. And again, asking the children. And then with teenagers, most teenagers are familiar with what suicide is. And so we just want to be very, very honest with them. And, your Uncle John took his life. We're not really sure the details right now. We'll talk more as we know more. But if you have any questions, I want you to know I'm going to be honest with you, and we're going to get through this together, and just reaffirming and helping the teenager know that you are a safe place and you're available for them. And so in the beginning, you may have more details, but you're not ready to talk about it. And so letting them know, I will share more later. Right now, this is all I can share. And I think that's appropriate.
Do you bring in people from the church who you happen to know for sure are going to respond to this appropriately and not with blame or shame or anything like that, that will be support people when a parent is not in an emotional state to be able to be as supportive as they would be in any other circumstance?
Absolutely. I think the more supportive people, mentors that can wrap around and care and help for our children, because the other piece of this is a lot of times our children don't want to upset us. They see us already crying, and so they'll pretend to be okay so we don't worry about them when they're really not okay. And so bringing those other people alongside gives them safe people to talk to and process with. And yeah, that's so important. And just people to listen. They don't have to have answers. Just be willing to be present and listen.
How do you, as a parent or a relative in this situation, address the issues of identity with a child, especially middle, elementary, and older, and into teenage years? Because kids will think, will I have a mental illness? Does this mean I am at risk for committing suicide? Is this something I should even look at? Talk to us about how you process that with your kids so that you can address that, because kids are going to be thinking that, even if, as you said, they're not actually saying it out loud because they don't want to upset their parents.
Right. No, that's a great question. And I think to begin with, letting your children know there are resources available and there are help, and asking them, if you ever have thoughts of wanting to hurt yourself, I want you to promise me that you'll come talk to me. Or if you won't talk to me, that you will tell somebody, and let's talk about this, because there are counselors, there's medication, there are all kinds of resources to help people to live well and thrive with mental illness. And so we don't want you to ever think this is the answer. And so just letting them know that there is hope and there are resources available. If they're in school, reminding them their school counselor is an advocate, someone they can go to and talk to, and just leaning into those resources. I think giving them books to read that are age appropriate of maybe people who have struggled and come out the other side can be very helpful. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of books on the younger end for that, but some older teenagers, there's some books and things they could read. And so I think just really extending hope to them that there are other answers that are much healthier.
And unfortunately, we're seeing more and more incidents of attempted or even completed suicide among elementary school aged kids. And we know that this is a problem among teenagers and adolescents, especially after they have witnessed death by suicide. That increases the risk even more. Can you talk about how to take some preventative steps, some responsive steps, and to look for those warning signs to help kids that may be thinking about that?
Yeah, one study that I read said that if you have lost someone to suicide yourself, you are 9 times more likely to consider suicide for yourself. And that's because the stigma has been broken, and you often think, well, if they couldn't deal with it, how could I? And so I think leaning in and again, helping people to know there are other resources, there are helps, and for us to look for those warning signs that you mentioned. Are they isolating? Are there drastic changes in behavior? Maybe they are normally a very happy person, and now all of a sudden they're sad and they never want to get out of bed. You see depression. Have their eating habits changed? Are they sleeping all the time or not sleeping at all? Are they giving things away? That's a big one. And then also just knowing sometimes life is hard. And when we go through really hard stuff, we may have these thoughts. And so knowing that and being willing to ask the question, sometimes when people go through hard things like you are, they think of hurting yourself. Has that crossed your mind? We tend to think if we ask the question, we're going to plant the idea in their mind, when it actually can give someone a sense of relief that somebody gets it. And then they talk about it and are usually open to help. Most people don't really want to die. They just don't want to hurt.
That is so true. And kids are going to present those behavioral issues a lot differently than teenagers or adults. Let's talk about some of those unusual behavioral demonstrations of despair among kids.
Yeah, children maybe they've always been a perfect student and their grades start dropping. They're acting out. They're getting in trouble. They're getting in fights. That could be one way, or it could go to the other extreme where they're not talking to their friends. They're really sullen. They're really depressed and pulling away and isolating. Any major changes in their personality or behavior you want to take note of, and that might be time to seek professional help.
Because a parent who's grieving may not recognize that their child's acting out behavior, their irritability, their anger outbursts are a representation of their despair rather than just being a misbehaving child.
Right. And so that's why it's so important for teachers and Sunday school teachers and people at church that know these children come alongside and really watch, because like you said, the parent is in survival mode and they may miss it. And so if someone we love is experiencing this, we want to be present so that we can help them and help their children navigate these difficult situations.
Are there some scripts that we need to deliver to the teachers and the other supportive people that are in your child's life so that they know how to respond correctly and not say all the wrong things that they might be inclined to say otherwise?
That's a great idea. And that's not really something I addressed, but I'm glad you asked it. It is a great question. I think helping teachers to know, to let the child be the one to kind of dictate whether or not you discuss it, because some children don't want to talk about it. School is the one place they can get away from it, and they don't want to talk about it, and they don't want their peers to know. But on the other hand, some children need to talk about it, and they're going to talk about it. One of the parents that I interviewed for this book was sharing with me that it was Father's Day, and they were all making cards for their father. And then this one child said, well, my dad killed himself. What am I supposed to do? And another parent called that teacher and was like, I don't like that your class is talking about suicide. And so it was a really difficult situation. And it was a time that the teacher could have used it in a positive way to really teach these children, sometimes life is really hard and we feel like we don't have anywhere to go. And so if any of you ever feel this way, I want you to come talk to me, and kind of use it. And instead of being proud of the honesty of this child, it was almost like they thought it was contagious. And if we talk about it, it's going to happen in our families. And so just being sensitive to that, letting the child kind of take the lead. And if you do sense other children are uncomfortable, pulling that child aside and letting them just talk to you. They don't necessarily have to tell the whole class, but be that listening ear, that empathetic person that they can share with and be real. Because if you're with them in that, if hard times come, they're more likely to come to you.
Dr. Ford, I know that you have more resources in your wonderful new book, Through the Tears. Can you talk about your book and how people can connect with you and follow you and get a copy for their own families?
Yeah, absolutely. The book is really for any stage of loss, whether it's that it has just happened and you don't know how to tell your child, or I've had parents call me who've read the book that it's been 2 or 3 years out. And they said, I wondered why now all of a sudden our children are having such a difficult time. Here we are healing and moving past it. It's like it's just happened for them. And so really helping parents to kind of navigate with their kids wherever you are in the journey. And ultimately knowing we have to lean on the Holy Spirit and the power of Christ, that He is our hope and He is going to be the one who brings peace to our children. And so, but you can find me at www.drfordwrites, that's WRITES, and the book is also available on Amazon.
I hope that all of you listening will access Dr. Ford's very important resource, if not for your own family, for those that are in your community that may suffer from this horrible tragedy. And of course, I also hope that you will come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.